This is so weird. Since when did I have a mirror? So for those members of my audience who are a little slow, which for once isn't just me, second year has rolled around and now I have a house to myself. Well, me and 4 other men. Oh, jeez. Alright, mate. Regardless, I'm pretty optimistic for this year, and for those of you who are worried, yes, this is what I've been doing. I wasn't just doing jack shit. Well, certainly not all the time, but I digress. Having just seen Joker and adoring it, I feel I should move slightly further into the comic book scene of video games, and with Joker fresh in my mind, I know exactly where to start. Spider-Man. Wait, what? Unless you've been living under a Marvel-resistant rock for the past couple of months, you would have likely heard about the news regarding the ownership of Spider-Man's film rights between Disney and Sony. I think around 2 or 3 months ago, Sony closed the doors on a deal between Disney and Sony, and Spider-Man would no longer be involved in the MCU. Sony wanted to include Spider-Man in their own universe with Venom and such, but in the end, Disney and Sony were able to come to a deal. But think about that. If Tom Holland wasn't reprised for that role with Sony, that could have been our 5th film iteration of Spider-Man in around 2 decades, if you count Into the Spider-Verse, which I definitely am. But I can kind of see why this happened. Spider-Man is such a profitable asset, and in this world of superhero madness on the silver screen, it's no wonder both Disney and Sony want him for themselves. So think about that, Tom Holland. The next time you're complaining, you've got $2 billion companies going after you, while most of us just get librarians. Nah, I'm only joking, Tom. I love you. Please message me. There have now been 8 solo Spider-Man films since 2002, with the most recent one and Sony's most profitable release being Spider-Man Far From Home. It made over $1 billion, so I can understand why they were quarreling. But as I was reading through all the news about it, it got me thinking. What about the upcoming Marvel gaming universe, and more specifically, what's going to happen to Insomniac's Spider-Man? So I thought, because I have no idea what's going to happen to Spider-Man or his game series, and because I have nothing fucking better to do, I want to look into the majesty that was Marvel's Spider-Man for the PS4 before all these huge companies start tarnishing it again, which at this rate is going to happen in the next 7 fucking minutes of this video. The narrative for Peter Parker this time takes us a bit further into the future, 8 years to be precise, so we join early 20s Spider-Man basically just living life as a classic millennial. Struggling.
That went about as well as I could have hoped.
I totally forgot. I mean, I didn't forget. I'll be there soon.
I'm sorry, I forgot. It's been a hard day.
I can't believe I haven't slept since the Fisk takedown.
I can't take this.
This is a trick question, isn't it?
Hell, the first scene in his apartment gives us all the evidence we need to see his situation. But I digress. Having been Spider-Man for this long, Peter has become a fairly experienced superhero and crime fighter, but clearly struggles to balance it with his own personal life. There's quite a lot going on in this game, so I'll try and sum it up as best as I can. But really, why don't you just play the game? I mean, like, what am I even doing here? Why don't I just go and do something more productive? Why do I have to be over here? Just play it anyway. What's even the fucking point? Why am I doing it? Following the capture of Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, a group known as the Demons begin their attempt to seize Fisk's illegal goods and aim to get hold of a bioweapon known as Devil's Breath. Their leader, Mr. Negative, also known as Martin Lee, the head of the homeless shelter Feast, threatens Mayor Norman Osborn, and as a result, he calls in a defense group called Sable International, who eventually go rogue and hold down rules within Manhattan. Lee is captured and sent to the maximum security prison called the Raft. Meanwhile, Otto Octavius, who Peter has been working for at the time, has his work shut down by Osborn for violating safety rules, and as a result, becomes ill and begins to obsess over creating an enhanced suit that exceeds human capabilities via neural interface. Because of his obsession and need for revenge, Doc Ock is born and breaks all the Raft prisoners out and leaves Spider-Man to die. With the major players that are Mr. Negative, Electro, Rhino, Vulture, Scorpion, and Doc Ock out in New York, and with the release of Devil's Breath by the hands of Octavius, Spider-Man has a lot of cleaning up to do and must defeat all his enemies and save Manhattan from the impending pandemic. There are several other minor plot points, such as the introduction to Miles Morales in this universe, as well as Mary Jane's introduction to the investigative areas of the story, but they don't really matter all that much. I've also just realised that Miles Morales was in 2 different types of media in 2018, and that makes a total of 3 different iterations of Spider-Man just in 2018 alone. Man. That'll make an impressive game and fuck, marry, kill. The game, much like most of the previous Spider-Man games, is an open-world action-adventure game, which while yes, describes around 80% of the releases nowadays, certainly works in Insomniac's case. The Manhattan sandbox has been perfectly designed in a way that allows for incredible flow when web swinging, and the traversal system in general is incredibly satisfying when you pull it off cleanly. Speaking of, the way you traverse the map is predominantly with the web swinging, wherein which you are required to attach to physical objects in order to swing, and the momentum and speed of the swing can be controlled by releasing the webs at specific points to gain height and move more quickly. It sounds ridiculously simple, doesn't it? Like, oh, webs have to attach to something to work on things. Like, yeah, that's just how swinging works. But in reality, you'd be surprised at how many other games haven't been able to achieve that simplicity in gameplay. Other traversal methods include point launch, which acts almost as a grappling hook, shooting you towards an indicated zone. This can be very easily merged in conjunction with the web swinging and makes for a tight and largely satisfying method of world traversal. There is a fast travel system, but it's about as useless as an ejector seat in an Apache, but it is there if you want it. You pussy. Combat-wise, it's just Arkham. Well, not entirely. You have your attacks as well as your dodges and counters through the use of Spidey Sense, which follows a somewhat similar pattern to the Arkham combat system. However, Spider-Man alters the method very slightly with a focus on web-based and aerial attacks. Enemies can be knocked into the air and continually attacked, so in many cases, you may not even touch the ground until at least 4 guys have been dealt with. Successful and consecutive attacks build what's known as focus, which can be used to heal yourself, and if an entire bar fills up, allows for a finishing move to be undertaken. Some enemies, however, must be overcome using different approaches. The melee weapon wielding enemies must be knocked into the air or slipped under to avoid being hit, and shielded enemies must be attacked from behind. Enemies armed with whips will drag Spider-Man out of the air and require a counterattack worth 2 bars of focus to fight effectively. Other types of enemy include heavily armored agents who can take more damage, larger brutes that can withstand hits and even carry miniguns, and jetpack wearing enemies who remain airborne. All of these enemies get gradually introduced into the story throughout the game as it progresses, so it's not as much a difficulty curve as it is more of a difficulty oval. Like this one. I mean, what is this impostuous circle? What are you? Stealth combat also comes into play on occasion, where you must pick off enemies one by one without being seen using webs, which brings some downtime to the fast-paced combat, keeping a concise sense of flow to the gameplay. Moreover, much like how you gain more enemy types as the game progresses, Spider-Man also gains more powerful assets throughout. As you gain experience through missions and side activities, your level increases, with a maximum level of 50 being possible. Each increase of level unlocks new suits, suit mods, new gadgets, and their associated upgrades, each of which can be purchased using specific tokens from specific activities. Examples include collecting Peter's old backpacks, or in research labs that Harry Osborn has left, to even just taking pictures of landmarks in New York City. Each activity helps in unlocking every upgrade. The main one is likely the crime tokens, which you can even continue doing after the main game, just to keep your hero busy, I guess. Furthermore, some elements of gameplay don't even have Spider-Man in them, the dreaded stealth sections. Like, I've never got them. You know, you go from health to just instant loss if you get caught, which is not really how stealth works.
As you know, I can't be invited, but
You basically get to play as other characters like Miles or Mary Jane, who do their own investigative work without powers. And it's not awful, it's just a bit of a pace killer, you know? Like what alcohol is to me. There's even these little mini games that pop up at times, like this pipe dream-esque thing, and some quick time event set pieces to go through. And there's even a photo mode to take photos, which admittedly is pretty fucking cool. There is so much more to talk about with this game, but much like Spider-Man's current movie position, I feel like there's a little too much going on to describe it all. Which is not to say that's a bad thing. The fact that this disagreement has happened between these giant corporations just shows how valuable of an asset Spider-Man truly is. With many successful film appearances, more solo and ensemble movies on the way, some quality games out with potential sequels, and some not so quality ones that definitely won't. And because he's just an all-round fun and engaging character, I can see Spider-Man sticking around for a while. I've heard a lot of opinions and seen a lot of news of the so-called sheer mass of superheroes in the media, and you know, this whole idea of superhero fatigue coming into play. Some now just after the Infinity Saga, some even before that. And in some way I can kind of agree with them. But as we've seen, there's quite a lot of quality that can come out of characters like that. Perhaps, much like myself, seeing your comic book heroes and villains come out onto the big screen just to give you that sense of childhood dream, that nostalgia of seeing them in action. No pun intended. But regardless, if companies like Marvel and DC can keep my attention running until now, then who knows what we're in for the future. Maybe we'll hit the bottom of the barrel of D-list superheroes and villains like Dr. Bong, or Throg, or The Orb. I mean, what the fuck, Marvel?
Right, mate.
Wait, what moment?
What the fuck? I just told you! Alright.
Oh, that was too quick.
Oh, that was brilliant.